It's been about a week since the Trudeau government released its budget, tabled a budget, and apparently didn't resonate with a lot of Canadians, according to a recent poll. To chat about it in more detail is our political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley, who joins us once again from Toronto. So, Brian, why didn't Budget 2024 resonate with many Canadians?
Well, only about 10% think that the budget will actually help them in their personal lives. Most thinking it's going to hurt them, or more think it's going to hurt them than help them. And that's problematic for the Liberals because they put a lot of effort into this budget. They said, you know what, we're going to focus on millennials, we're going to focus on Gen Z, we're going to do all these things for housing, we're going to increase spending dramatically. It was all an attempt to make people believe that the government's on their side, that they have their back. And when you've only got 10% saying, oh, yeah, this is going to help me personally, most people either saying it's going to hurt them or they're shrugging and saying, I don't know, that's not good. Ju- this poll was done by Ipsos, biggest polling company in the world and biggest in Canada as well. And they asked things like, do you give it a two thumbs up or a two thumbs down or a shrug? And once you took out, there was about 28% that said, I have no idea. Once you took them out, it was 17% said, I give it two thumbs up, like Siskel and Ebert. 40% said, I give it two thumbs down. And 43% said, meh, I don't know. They're shrugging their shoulders. I mean, that's not the reaction you want when you spend 2 weeks going around the country in an election campaign style tour, trying to sell your budget. Then you release your budget. Then you go back out trying to sell it. And people are just not impressed. That's not a good sign, especially when, as I said, you hope that this would get you voters back, voters that have been fleeing your party for the others.
Now, part of the budget did cater to some of the younger demographic, including millennials and Gen Z, and making amortization on new home builds 30 years instead of the traditional 25. Now, do you think maybe some of the younger voters, this really resonates with them and they'll maybe change their vote to support the Liberal Party, Brian?
Not in any real way. I mean, even when you break it down, and Ipsos broke it down, and I go deep into the data tables when I get a poll like this from Ipsos. It's like, how many people with high school education or college or university or, doctorate degrees back at what age groups. This time they broke it down by generation. And when you do that, the among Gen Z, it's 38% are backing Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. The NDP is at 28% and the Liberals are at 27. The Liberals are in third place. So no, it's not moving votes. When you look at millennials, it's 40% voting for the Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. And I believe it's 24% for the Liberals, 23% for the NDP. So it's not moving. Overall, you've got a 19-point gap, 43% for the Conservatives, 24% for the Liberals, and 19% for the NDP. This is not going in the favor of the Trudeau Liberals. Their strongest demographic is still women over 60. Imagine a retired female civil servant, and that is right now your core Trudeau voter. They are the most loyal. And even in that demographic, the Conservatives are winning. So none of this is good. Even when you get into Quebec, Hal, and you look at, traditionally a very strong Liberal area, well, the Bloc's in front at 33%. The Conservatives and the Liberals are effectively tied. I think it's 28-27 with the Liberals up by one. So they're effectively tied in Quebec. And in every other region of the country, the Conservatives are well ahead by a significant margin. I mean, you'll forgive me. I forget how big the margin is in Alberta because it's more than 20 points. But even in Atlantic Canada, it's an 8-point lead for the Conservatives. The Conservatives might take every seat in Alberta again. I know they do in Saskatchewan. They could take every seat in Alberta again, or they'll lose a couple in Edmonton. But that's going to be the story across the country. One seat model that I saw said that there would be one Liberal between Ontario and the Lower Mainland if an election were held today. One Liberal, probably in Manitoba or Edmonton.
Brian, former Bank of Canada Governor David Dodge was also not impressed with Budget 2024, in particular when it came to the capital gains tax, and he's not alone.
No, he's not. And look, David Dodge, who was Paul Martin's number two in balancing the budget, in the Chrétien Martin years. David Dodge, who worked alongside, Don Drummond, who worked alongside David Dodge and Paul Martin, also critical. John Manley, Jean Chrétien's last finance minister, a liberal finance minister, very critical of it. And I interviewed this guy named Robert Aislinn for the Full Comment podcast that I host. Aislinn was Bill Morneau's budget chief from 2015 to 2017. He helped design the first several Trudeau budgets. And he said, look, this one does not help with growing the economy. It does not help with keeping spending under control. There are so many problems with this, but specifically on the capital gains tax. This is the Liberal plan, Hal, is to run on the capital gains tax. You'll notice that the Conservatives aren't talking about this. Pierre Poilievre does not criticize the capital gains tax changes, and it's not because he agrees with them. He doesn't want to give Trudeau what he wants, and Trudeau wants this to be a battle about the capital gains tax, and he wants everyone to stop talking about the carbon tax. Here's why. This is the politics behind it all. The Liberals are losing on the carbon tax. They've lost their own voters on the carbon tax. Nobody likes it. They want it gone. Okay, let's bring in a new tax. Or let's change an existing tax. So they bring in the changes to the capital gains. And their claim, and it's right in the budget document, it's a complete fabrication, but it says this will only impact 0.13% of the Canadian public, Canadian taxpayers. So they're going beyond the old Occupy Wall Street line about we're against the 1%, we're going to stick it to the 1%. No, they're going after the 0.13%. So that's what they want the fight to be about, because then they can say Pierre Poilievre only cares about the rich. But here's the thing. This tax will affect doctors. The Canadian Medical Association has said this will hurt doctors who have been saving for their retirement. They don't have pensions. Your family doctor doesn't have a pension. They save for their retirement within their corporation, or they sell their practice when they retire. This is going to hurt them. Tradespeople who run their own company, this is going to hurt them. Farmers selling off land to pay for their retirement, like so many I know across Western Canada. You get to a certain age, you're not farming the same number of acres, or you're not farming at all. People start selling off plots of land to pay for the retirement. That it's going to hurt all of them, any small business person. But the Trudeau Liberals want to make all of those people out to be the monopoly man with the monocle and the top hat, and they want to campaign against those people in a class warfare, generational warfare, far left-wing populist campaign. It's like taking what Donald Trump does, but flipping it and making it work for Trudeau from the left. Very populist, very angry, telling people your problems are not due to you, they're due to those people over there, and we're going to get them.
I saw that you recently interviewed federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Good job, by the way, Brian. And he mentioned in the interview that not only does he want to axe the carbon tax, but he also wants to cut income taxes to make life a little more affordable for Canadians. Is this something new from Poilievre?
Well, it was new to me, and if you watch the interview, you hear me interrupt him after he says he wants to cut income taxes to make life more affordable. I said, well, you want to cut income taxes? He said, oh, I've said it many times. Now, I've watched a lot of his rally speeches. I've watched a lot of his media things. I had not seen it. He and his staff assured me, no, he's raised this many times. And it's not going to be income tax cuts for people at the top, although I would actually recommend that, because the Trudeau Liberals have brought in income tax levels that discourage people from staying here and investing here. We should get rid of the ones that inhibit investment. But what he's talking about is really for people at the bottom. He says, you're trying to get ahead. You make it, Trudeau takes it, was the line he used. And he said, we've got to make life more affordable for people who are working hard and just trying to get ahead. And that's not happening at the moment.
Canada Post, Brian, has said no once again to participating in the so-called gun buyback. Now, we chatted about this a couple of years ago, and now the CBC is reporting that Canada Post says, no, we don't want to be the drop-off point for you to bring your banned guns to send back to the government. So why are they saying no?
Because they're worried about safety. And look, this is the reason that I heard when I first reported this a couple of years ago, including talking about it with you here on Bridge City News. So kudos to CBC for catching up to us 2 years later or so. But Canada Post is saying, they're worried about friction between gun owners who are being told you've got to hand over your legal, lawful property that you paid for and drop it off at the Canada Post. Whether you accept their portrayal of the angry gun owner or not, and look, they have every right to be angry, but most of them are law-abiding. You know, imagine this. Y- y- where are the Canada Post outlets most often now? They're in pharmacies like Shoppers Drug Mart or Rexall or what have you. Are you going to go to the Shoppers Drug Mart out in Varsity Village in Lethbridge with your 10 guns that have been banned and hand them over to some teenager who's working the night shift from 5 to 9? And this is a safe way to transport firearms that many people in the criminal world would love to get their hands on. It makes no sense. The RCMP has told the federal government, we don't have the resources, so if you want this, you're going to have to increase the budget. They won't do that. They've gone to provincial police forces, which you guys don't have in Alberta, but you should. They've gone to provincial police forces like the Ontario Provincial Police, the Sûreté de Quebec, and asked them, and they said, we don't have the ability to do this. They've tried to convince major municipal forces. Everybody's saying, "Look, we don't have time to do our regular jobs, never mind add this on to it." They've tried to ask the Canadian Armed Forces, and they've said, no, this is not our job. So, you want to know why this was announced on May 1st, 2020. And here we are, it is April 23rd, 2024. We're almost 4 full years out and they haven't done anything. It's because they don't have a clue how to do it. And the federal, apparatuses that they have access to are all telling them no.
Let's talk about the pro-Palestinian rallies which took place in Ottawa recently over the weekend. And apparently there was a lot of chanting in support of Hamas, down with Israel and so forth. A lot of hate speech was heard, allegedly, Brian, during this rally. So why aren't some of these people being charged?
Well, the Ottawa Police Service is investigating at this point. They've been, said publicly, "Yep, we've opened an investigation." They were walking in front of the Langevin block where the Prime Minister's office is, and in front of Centre Block. And what they were chanting was October 7th shows were almost free. Long live October 7th, and claims that all forms of resistance are acceptable, meaning the killings of October 7th, the killings of men, women, children, elderly, babies, all acceptable for the resistance. I've been calling these pro-Hamas rallies for a long time, Hal. They are not pro-Palestinian. I've been out to so many of them, and they're deeply disturbing. And you see the same people over and over again with the same slogans and the same calls to uh, basically destroy Israel, wipe Israel off the map, and then you call them on it, and they say, "Oh, no, 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 we're not anti-Jewish." And the next thing they're chanting, "Jews go back to Europe." There's this new slogan that has shown up at all the rallies saying that the Jewish people have no ties to Israel. They have no ties to the land. They won't call it Israel. They call it Palestine, which is a term that only developed after the Romans shut down an Israeli rebellion. They say they have no ties to Palestine, go back to Europe, and they claim that's where Jews are from. This is horrific. If these people had trucker caps on and were protesting COVID, they'd have their bank accounts frozen, they'd have their lives destroyed, and they'd be in jail by now. But the prime minister was shamed into making a comment. This happened mid-afternoon on Saturday. It was 7:30 at night before he commented on it on Sunday. Pierre Poilievre commented on it a day later after he saw the video and heard what had happened. Here in Ontario, last I checked, Ottawa is still in Ontario. Not a single provincial political leader has commented on this. They were all commenting on the convoy when it happened, and the opposition parties were calling on Premier Ford to denounce them even harder. Now they won't even comment on it. So, very disturbing what's happening in our streets, and very disturbing the political reaction to all of this.
Brian, about a year ago, British Columbia decriminalized a number of drugs, and activists ever since have been trying to convince other jurisdictions to follow BC's example. But Brian, there's been a push in British Columbia to admit that they actually went the wrong way. Can you explain?
Yeah, I mean, I know that in Alberta, Premier Danielle Smith was ridiculed for saying we're not going in that direction and we're not going the safer supply route and we're going to add more beds for treatment and recovery. I think that that is the way to go. Here in Ontario, Premier Ford has leaned that way, not quite as hard. But, our chief medical officer in Ontario, what, 2, 3 weeks ago, came out with a report saying we should decriminalize all hard drugs, just like BC. It'll save lives. The evidence shows that it doesn't. It has not saved lives. Last year, with 11 months of all hard drugs being decriminalized and the safer supply model and all of that happening, BC had another record year for overdose deaths from opioids. And now you've got small town municipal politicians, but also at least 3 Vancouver councillors, and I hope it grows. I hope it grows by the minute, saying we need to revisit this. You also had the deputy chief of the Vancouver Police Department, who is the head of BC Police Chiefs, testifying before a House of Commons committee that a good chunk of the safer supply opioid pills end up being diverted into the public. So they're sold to the public. This scourge of addiction it's hitting everywhere, Hal. It's hitting. I can go out my door here in downtown Toronto and see it. You can see it in Lethbridge. You can see it in Saskatoon. You can see it in Calgary, in Montreal, in Halifax, in Vancouver. It doesn't matter where you go. This scourge is there. And the activists have held the balance of power, the sway for far too long, and they've convinced us to go down this road, telling us that it will save lives. And who wants to be against saving lives? Nobody does. And so I think a lot of politicians went against their better judgment and agreed with things, or just were silent in their complicity. And now several are starting to speak up, and good for them, because this is not the way to go, and the evidence is showing it. So Premier Danielle Smith was right. The others were wrong, and let's hope that we don't go down this path.
Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Hal.